I wanted to share today a story that has been kind of weighing on me for a while now. Uh, One that I've wanted to share, what I've wanted to talk about, and what we can really learn from it. It's a very well known story from the Bible, but it's one that oftentimes, again, because of culture and time, we miss a lot of what is actually happening in the story and what it actually means for us. So we're going to look today at the story of David and Bathsheba. And everybody knows the story of David and Bathsheba, right? What if I told you that we're actually missing a good portion of it? So much so that the dogs even come down and find out about it, right? Okay, she's laying down. Who knows? We may get a yes. But let me read this. This is from 2 Samuel chapter 11. My daughter's giving me dog toys here to play with. There you go. Yeah, come chew your toy. 2 Samuel chapter 11, I'm reading out of the Tree of Life version, which I have really grown to love this translation. But I'm going to read the story and stop at points and explain some things that we're missing. Again, because of the culture and the time, and that we'll oftentimes miss what's really happening in the overall point here. So, 2 Samuel 11:1. Now it came to pass at the turn of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his officials with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David stayed in Jerusalem. Okay, so here's our first problem. We all kind of read this, oh yeah, David sends generals out to lead the army, right? At the time, kings led their armies. Kings didn't stay home for wars. They went and led them and fought in them. They were the general on the spot, and even though they may have had others direct the army, the kings always went out. And here, David's probably in his mid-40s, and David's going, I think I want to stay home this time. Let's take it easy. And David doesn't go out and lead his armies like he's supposed to. He stays home. This is David's first failure. He's already failing to lead as a king should lead. And it causes him even more trouble later. So one evening, David rose from his bed and strolled on the roof of the royal palace. Now, picture this. We like to think of Jerusalem as this huge city at the time. But really, what we call the city of David was much, much smaller. It probably only had a few thousand people, tops. And I mean like 4-digit, not even 10,000 people. So it's a small town. Everybody knows everything. Everybody knows everybody else's businesses. And the way that the cities were set up, you would have David's palace at the center. The closer you were to the palace, the more influence you had. So the further away, the less you were important. So if you're close, you're important. So keep that in mind. David strolled on the roof of the royal palace. Then from the roof, he saw a woman washing, a very beautiful woman. Okay, so this house is close to the palace because it's close enough that he can be on his roof and see it. So this is somebody important. As far as Bathsheba, whether she's doing this on purpose is debatable. It goes on to say that she has ritually purified herself after her time. This is something that women had to do. And she's close enough to the palace. Does she know David could see her? Is she set up, possibly? Maybe. But also maybe not. I've seen arguments both ways on that, on whether Bathsheba's purposely seducing David or not. And I've seen it play both ways. Regardless, what David ends up doing is inexcusable. But I just want to throw that out there, that there are legitimate arguments both ways. So he sees a very beautiful woman. So David sent someone to inquire about the woman, and he reported, "Isn't this Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" Okay, so this is interesting here. Here's where we miss the culture, because we see, oh, David's asking who it is because he doesn't know. You didn't have a king who didn't know who was near him. So when he sends for a servant, and the servant comes in, and David says, "Who's that out on the roof?" To protect the king's reputation and honor and not shame him, because remember, I've talked about honor-shame culture. Here's a good example of it. The servant replies, "Oh, well, we all know that that's actually Bathsheba, Uriah the Hittite's wife, because he's pretending like the king is asking him to test him, and that way it doesn't look like the king doesn't know." So the servant delivers an answer that answers the king's question while letting him look like he's honorable and knowledgeable. It's also interesting that Bathsheba's a couple things here. Bathsheba means daughter of Sheba, uh, daughter of the promise, or daughter of Sheba, the country, which is Ethiopia. If you remember, the Queen of Sheba then comes later to visit King Solomon. So is Bathsheba from Ethiopia, in which case she very possibly isn't white, like we oftentimes picture her. She's also married to Uriah the Hittite. Hittites are not Jews. Uriah is a mercenary. He is one of uh, David's military leaders. His home is close enough to the palace that this guy is a guy of influence. It's actually thought that he might even be one of David's mighty men. So this is a guy that's close to David, that has influence, that isn't Jewish, but definitely has a role to play. And here David's about to take his wife, a guy that, at the very least, he's a high-ranking mercenary, and very possibly more than that. So we've got Bathsheba, the daughter of Sheba, and Uriah the Hittite. Neither one of them are Israelites. And here they are. So David sent messengers, plural, remember, small town, and took her. So David has one person in the palace that he asks, and then he sends multiple people, at least two, to go get Bathsheba. So we've got at least 3 people in the palace who know what's going on. We like to think that, oh, this is some secret hush-hush thing, and nobody knew. Small town. I mean, 3 servants know, everybody knows. This is the talk of the palace. It's no secret. Here they go. David takes her, makes her come to him, and he lays with her. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, "I'm pregnant." Okay, so here's the other thing that we miss. First off, it's no secret. Everybody knows David has done this, but it's okay, because David is the king, and what the king wants to do, the king can do. And so this is permissible. The culture says, sure, if the king wants to take somebody else's wife, that's his prerogative as king. That's okay. And we have a lot of times our culture tells us that stuff is okay, that God then says, mm-mm. And that's what we're going to get to, is we have a culture here that's saying, this is fine. It's not a secret. In fact, Uriah comes back, and it's pretty obvious Uriah knows what's going on. Because when David sends Uriah back to David, David asks him how Joab was, how the troops fared, how the war was going, all the small talk in verse 7. And then verse 8, David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." He's basically telling Uriah, go back home, spend time with your wife, and, give me a pass. Give me permission. When Uriah left the royal palace, a present from the king followed him. Here's my bribe to pay you off for sleeping with your wife, because I'm the king and this is okay, but I'm going to make peace with you. Uriah knows what's going on. Whether the messengers that fetched him told him or somebody else did, Uriah knows. And rather than give the king a pass and say, it's okay, no problem, king, you borrowed my wife, but I'm all right with it, Uriah instead sleeps at the door of the royal palace with all his master's servants and doesn't go down to the house. He's publicly shaming David. He is publicly saying, I know what you did, and I'm not going to give you a pass. I'm not going to pretend everything is okay. I'm not going to say, oh, it's the king, it's fine. When they informed David, saying Uriah didn't go down to his house, David said to Uriah, haven't you come from a journey? Why don't you go down to your house? Go sleep with your wife and tell me it's okay. But Uriah answered David, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my lord Joab and the officers of my lord are camping in the open field. Should I then go down to my house to eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. He's double shaming David here. One, because he's not going to his wife when David wants him to, but he also talks about the ark is out the field. The people of Israel and Judah are down there. The Lord Joab, his officers, everybody is out there fighting. Oh, except you, King David, where you're supposed to be. You're sitting here at home on your doofus instead of leading the country. Why would I, when everybody else is out fighting where they're supposed to be, go give you, who is not where you're supposed to be, a pass on your military leadership and taking my wife? He's double shamed him. This is why David gets mad. This is why David gets upset. He hasn't given up yet, though. He actually then goes on and tells his people, go get Uriah drunk, so drunk that you have to drag him back to his house and drop him off, and then we can pretend he slept with his wife, and it's okay. Except Uriah ends up sleeping in the barracks instead and still doesn't go home. So David's been humiliated, embarrassed, shamed, and this is why David's like, okay, I'm sending you back with orders to die. I need to bump you off. I need to get rid of you. You've embarrassed me. You've humiliated me. You haven't given me permission to do what I, as king, should be able to do, because I'm the king. I can do what I want and have who I want and do what I want. And everybody around me is going, yay, go king. This is David's ultimate sin. The adultery is bad enough, but society is telling him this is fine. But if we go on to the story in chapter 12, the prophet Nathan comes up and basically tells David this wonderful story, this beautiful story about a stolen lamb, and David's like horrified. How could anybody do such a thing? And then Nathan reminds David, that's you. God holds you to this standard. Society may say that this thing is okay, but God says, it's got to be here. And all too often in our culture today, we say things are okay that God has said is not. God basically told David, no, you can't just go grab another woman. No, you can't grab somebody else's wife. No, you can't drag him off the field and try to pass it off as okay. Even if society says it's okay, it's not. And then you go and send him to die to make up and cover up for what you know isn't appropriate. King or not, society says it's fine. God says no. And here's the ultimate deal that we have to learn from this. Society will tell us a lot of times that there are a lot of things that are okay, that are permissible. Hey, just do what feels right to you. Hey, just seek after your happy. God wants you to be happy, not holy. And God says no. God's called us to something bigger, something better, a higher standard. Why are we struggling to reach the lost today? Because we're not living to the standard that God has called us to. We're living to a standard that we set for ourselves and go, oh, but it's okay because society says so. Society says it's okay to hate other people. So we do. Society says, I don't have to love you because you're different. So we don't. Society says, I can support all this stuff that's ungodly. So we do. God has called us to a higher standard, to live a holy life, a pure life, free from sexual immorality, free from impairment, free from hatred, free from discord, that we are to love sacrificially. The fruit of our lives should be love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. That when we're giving into arguments and discord and pride, that we're not living to the standard God called us to. Whether the world says it's okay or not, God says it's not. Are you living to God's standard or the world's? Because the world's isn't going to give you the pass to where you think you're going or where you want to go. You've got to live to God's standards. And if you're not living to God's standards, beware. You want to know more about God's standards? Check this. By the way, our standard isn't to be going around pointing fingers. We need to be pointing at ourselves. What do you have in your life that isn't living up to God's standard? What do you have in your life that the society around you and the culture may say is okay, but God says no? I pray that you would think about that you would examine it. Don't wait for some prophet to come to you at the last second, because they're probably not going to, because you know better. God's already telling you, with the words of the prophet Nathan, that what you think is okay, God's called you to something better and bigger. Will you surrender yourself and what culture says is okay, And will you pursue God and his standards for everything? Because he's called you to do it. Will you do it?